Okay, and a good morning to you all from down here in sunny Oz. Here we are with the BSA B44 Victor special. So the B44VS, commonly known as the Victor. And today we're going to have a look at the tank, the small bobber tank. Now most of these tanks were procured in earlier years by those who wished to customize their bikes and turn them into long extended fork chopper type concepts. And as a result, for that chopper concept, they would procure this tank. So lots of Victors lost their little aluminium bopper like tank in early years. And I know for a fact that this bike here, it's a B44VS. When I first got the bike, it actually had a BSA Star tank on it, the tank that did not belong to the bike. Okay, so getting back to the original reason of this video, and that is on the BSA Victor's fuel tank, we had a little cap, a fuel cap. Now the name of that fuel cap, some were painted. I really didn't like them painted. I like the exposed alloy, polished aluminium alloy, and it really contrasts nicely with the polished alloy portion of the tank. This here and the fuel cap complement each other quite nicely. But anyway, what we're about to get into is the replacement of the seal, the rubber seal. It's spring-loaded here, it clamps down on the filler neck of the tank and it prevents spillage underway. Once that spillage gets onto your paint, most paints are resistant, but if it happens often enough, you will get some discoloration. Okay, so I've lifted the tank, and here you can see the weathering. Now that's quite hard. There's not much resilience in there. There's not much flex in there at all. It's had all its plasticizers leached out of there, and once that happens, they become very, very, very hard. And you've got to remember, underway down in there, you get fuel splashing up everywhere. This bike had sat for some time, but as a result, age and solvents constantly attacking that rubber, it will harden and it will need to be replaced. So our next step is, there's a little hex nut there, hex head nut, and you can just see my fingernail is on the thread. So that's about an 11/32 socket or ring spanner. And make sure the sockets, the socket segregations are not recessed deep, because you haven't got much purchase there. It's just the flats on the hex head are very, very thin. So make sure you get a good all-round contact when you undo that nut. Okay, so here we have our 11/32 socket, and we'll commence taking that off. I have a little ratchet on the top there that once it's loose, I can spin that off. So it feels loose enough now where I can do the rest by hand. Now the last thing we want is anything dropping down into that filler and into the tank. Otherwise it's going to, if it does drop down in there, it's going to create considerable work, more work, getting it out. So it's loose now, so I'm just commencing to undo that. You can see the flats on the hex head nut moving, so we will release that from its position. I'll put that over here, and now that there, it's a spring loaded to make sure that it pushes this seal hard up against the filler neck. So we take that off. It's the underside of it, so you just got to be careful to remember that the larger retaining disc and the smaller retaining disc are situated and put back in that same position. The smaller disc, of course, that we can see there, let me take this off here. Be mindful of how that goes back on. Now that's the first thing to go back on. So the first disc, being the smaller of the two, of course, is smaller so as it allows the filler neck to go on the outside of that outer diameter of the smaller disc to seal the rubber, to seal with the rubber. Now just looking at that rubber seal, you can just see, giving you a fairly clear view of it. It's all hardened, it's all perished, and I doubt very much whether it would have been sealing properly. Now you have an inbuilt vent here, and as you can appreciate, you need some air to enter through here, through that small hole and into the tank. If there was no air, no vent or air being allowed to pass through into that tank, your fuel would not flow from the tank down into the carburetor. It would create an airlock, or a vacuum if you like, and the engine would starve for fuel and stop. So I'll proceed now to remove this old gasket from the retainer, the gasket, tank gasket seal retainer. As you can see, we've separated those two discs, and just to give you a bit of a look at what's happening here, you can see that it's well past its replacement date. So that small disc there goes on the top of there like thus. And that part there, the dished part of the larger disc, goes towards the cap. So I'll commence to assemble that. Being mindful when you put that back on, when you assemble it, you'll see just here where my fingernail is a small vent hole. That's your screw retaining fastener, bolt, nut, but here is a vent to allow the tank to breathe. Now on here, the smaller disc, we have a vent hole too. Make sure that you don't align those two holes. Make sure you stagger them by at least 90 degrees, putting this vent hole away from that vent hole, called staggering. That way if there's any splash, it reduces the likelihood that it'll come out past that and onto the tank. Now before I assemble, you can just see how wet that is. What that is silicon. I like to spray these rubber seals with silicon. Silicon actually puts back into the rubber what the environment leaches out. So the silicon, if you like, puts into the rubber plasticizes, reinstating them not fully to their original state, but preserving them and most certainly putting some flex and elasticity back into the rubber itself. Okay, so just to reiterate whilst assembling, remember we put that little disc in there, that disc washer. It's that one there. There we go. Now we put that in there. And on top of there, we put that fellow there, which is our spring. Either side's the same. Goes over the whole assembly there. That thread assembly, it covers it. And just to reiterate, the larger disc, the only problem with portrait. Okay, so the larger disc with the larger vent to the back, and the smaller disc with the smaller vent hole to the front. Okay, so here we have the assembly. Make sure that hex nut with its flats sit down into that recessed area. And there you have it. And you can position that before you tighten it up fully so it's nice and symmetrical around the border. And of course, make sure you've got your rag over the filler hole. Don't want any nasties to drop down in there. And there you have it. Then you just proceed to tighten up the hex head. Now that's your Monza cap seal replacement. And there you have it. The seal has been renewed. Look, and just one more important tip. Just to preserve that release, that clip lock release on your Monza cap. When you undo it, push down. Get your thumb, push down. See how I'm moving that? Push down, then push your clip in, and then release it. And when you're going to do it up, do the reverse. Push down, or start again. So to release, you push that in and lift up, and when you close the petrol lid, push that tab in, and then close it. So there's no sharp, abrupt click of the mechanism in here. Because if you don't release it like that, and then if you push it hard like this, where you hear that big clip, you're going to wear out your striker. You'll wear out your striker very quickly. So just help it along by, when you release it, push it in, and when you close it, push that in and then close it so there's no click. It'll serve you a long time that way.